My heart sank as I pulled into my driveway, home early from a trip, only to see my ranch, my sanctuary, swarmed by strangers, their hands on my furniture, my memories, my life. The HOA president, Karen, stood smirking, clutching a gavel like a trophy. She'd called 911, claiming I was trespassing on my own land. Why? Because she was auctioning off everything I owned. How could one woman's petty grudge spiral into this nightmare? What twisted rule gave her this power? Stick around to uncover the shocking truth behind this HOA's ruthless betrayal and how far I'd go to fight back. I'd always dreamed of a quiet life, and my ranch on the edge of Willow Creek seemed perfect. The wide open fields, the creak of my porch swing, the distant hum of crickets. It was my haven after years of city chaos. I'm just a regular guy, mid-40s, a mechanic who saved every penny to buy this slice of peace. My neighbors seemed friendly enough, waving as they mowed their lawns in our tidy, HOA-governed community. The rules felt fair at first. Keep your grass short, no loud parties. Simple. I fit right in, tinkering in my garage, grilling on weekends, planting a small garden out back. Life was good. But something about Karen, the HOA president, always felt off. Her sharp eyes lingered too long when I'd wave from my porch. She'd jot notes in her little black book during her neighborhood patrols, her heels clicking with purpose down our cul-de-sac. I shrugged it off. Maybe she was just overly dedicated. The HOA board, led by her, sent friendly reminders about fence heights and mailbox colors. I complied, even when the paint code for my shed felt oddly specific. I didn't want trouble. My ranch was my refuge, a place to rebuild after a messy divorce and long workdays. I thought I'd found stability. Then came the first letter, slipped under my door on a crisp autumn evening. It wasn't the usual typed notice. Handwritten, it demanded I remove my garden by week's end. No explanation, just a deadline. I reread it, confused. My tomatoes and sunflowers weren't hurting anyone. The HOA handbook didn't mention gardens being banned. I figured it was a mistake, maybe Karen's overzealousness. I'd talk to her, clear it up. But as I tucked the letter away, an uneasy feeling settled in. Something told me this was just the start of a battle I hadn't signed up for. About my garden was just the beginning, a spark that ignited a fire I couldn't extinguish. I stood in my backyard, staring at my sunflowers swaying in the breeze, their golden petals catching the late October light. They were my pride, a small victory after years of struggle. I wasn't about to rip them out over Karen's handwritten note. So I marched to her pristine colonial-style house at the end of the cul-de-sac, the HOA handbook tucked under my arm. Her doorbell chimed like a warning bell. When she answered, her smile was tight, her eyes cold. "The garden violates aesthetic standards," she said, citing a vague clause I couldn't find in the handbook. I argued it wasn't listed, but she just pointed to her clipboard and said, "Fix it or face fines." Her tone wasn't negotiable. By the next week, a $200 fine arrived in my mailbox. I was stunned. $200 for a few tomato plants? I paid it, gritting my teeth, thinking compliance would end this. I tore out the garden, the soil staining my hands as I uprooted each plant. My backyard looked barren, like a piece of me had been scraped away. I figured that was the end of it. But Karen's patrols didn't stop. She'd linger outside my ranch, scribbling notes, her pen moving like a predator circling prey. Then came the second letter. This one demanded I repaint my shed, claiming the shade of green I'd used, approved by the HOA 2 years ago, was now non-compliant. Another $300 fine unless I fixed it within 48 hours. I checked the handbook again. No mention of shed colors changing. I called the HOA office, but the line rang to voicemail. Karen's chipper voice promising a callback that never came. I repainted the shed, the chemical fumes burning my throat as I worked late into the night. My savings, already thin from the divorce, were dwindling. I couldn't keep up with her demands. Weeks later, a third notice arrived, this time about my mailbox. It was 1 inch too tall, the letter claimed, citing a rule I swore didn't exist. Another $500 fine. I measured the mailbox myself. Perfectly standard. I stormed to the next HOA meeting, handbook in hand, ready to call out the nonsense. The community center was packed, neighbors shifting uncomfortably in folding chairs. Karen stood at the podium, her gavel gleaming like a scepter. I raised my hand, voice steady, and asked why unlisted rules kept targeting me. She didn't flinch. "We're updating standards for community value," she said, her words dripping with authority. A few neighbors nodded. Others looked away. I realized then, Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was wielding power, and I was her favorite target. The fines kept coming, each one more absurd. $150 for excessive porch clutter, a single chair. $400 for unauthorized vehicle parking, my truck in my own driveway. My mailbox was re-inspected and deemed non-compliant again, another $500. I stopped sleeping. My nights spent poring over the handbook, searching for loopholes. My savings were nearly gone, and my mechanic's salary couldn't keep up. I started noticing Karen's allies, her hand-picked board members, watching my house, snapping photos. One neighbor, Tom, warned me quietly over coffee. "She's done this before," he whispered. "Got the Petersons' house foreclosed over fines they couldn't pay." My stomach churned. Was that her plan for me? I tried fighting back. I wrote a formal complaint to the HOA board, citing their own bylaws. No response. I contacted a lawyer, but his retainer fee was more than I could afford. I posted on the neighborhood forum, hoping to rally support. The post was deleted within hours, and Karen sent a warning about defamatory conduct. My frustration boiled into anger, but also fear. My ranch, my sanctuary, was slipping through my fingers. I started locking my doors at night, something I'd never done in Willow Creek. Karen's clipboard felt like a weapon, her rules a noose tightening around my life. Then the bombshell landed. A certified letter arrived not from the HOA, but from a local auction house. My ranch was scheduled for sale in 2 weeks, labeled abandoned property, due to unpaid fines and violations. My blood ran cold. I hadn't abandoned anything. I lived there every day. The letter cited an obscure HOA bylaw, allowing property seizure for chronic non-compliance. I called the auction house, my voice shaking. They confirmed Karen had filed the paperwork, claiming I'd vacated the property. I hadn't. I'd just been on a 2-week work trip fixing trucks across state lines. How could she declare my home abandoned? I drove to the HOA office, my hands trembling on the wheel. It was locked, lights off. I stood there, staring at the sign with Karen's name in bold. My ranch, every memory, every sacrifice, was on the line. I thought of my late father, who taught me to fix engines and never back down. I wasn't giving up, but Karen's grip was suffocating. What was her endgame? Why was she so hell-bent on destroying me? And worse, could I stop her before the auction gavel fell? The tires of my truck crunched over the gravel driveway as I pulled in earlier than planned, the engine rumbling to a stop under the fading twilight sky. My 2-week work trip had wrapped up a day ahead, exhausting hauls, fixing rigs, and dusty towns, but I was eager for home. The ranch waited like an old friend, its weathered fence posts silhouetted against the horizon. But as I stepped out, slamming the door behind me, a wave of wrongness hit like a gut punch. Strangers milled about my front yard, poking through my belongings. Folding tables groaned under stacks of my tools, my father's antique wrench set glinting in the dim light. An auctioneer barked numbers from a makeshift podium on my porch, his voice echoing across the fields. Bidders nodded, hands raised, claiming pieces of my life as if it were a garage sale. My heart hammered, blood roaring in my ears. This wasn't a dream. This was real. My sanctuary violated. I froze for a split second, the world tilting. Then rage surged, hot and unyielding. I charged forward, boots pounding the earth, shoving past a cluster of onlookers. "What the hell is this?" My voice boomed, raw with fury, but inside, panic clawed at me. How had it escalated so fast? The fines, the notices, they'd been petty stabs, but this was amputation. Karen stood at the center of it all, her clipboard clutched like a shield, her lips curled in that smug victory smile. She wore her HOA badge pinned prominently, a queen presiding over her conquest. Our eyes locked, and in that instant, I saw it. No surprise in her gaze, just cold calculation. She'd planned this. Timed it with my absence, declaring my ranch abandoned to trigger the seizure clause she'd buried in the bylaws. "Stop this now!" I roared, grabbing the auctioneer's arm mid-bid. The crowd murmured, shifting uneasily, phones emerging from pockets like weapons. The auctioneer stammered, papers fluttering in his hand, but Karen stepped forward, her heels digging into my lawn. She raised her hand, signaling silence, her authority unchallenged. "This property is in foreclosure for non-compliance. You've ignored every warning. The HOA has the right." Lies! I'd paid fines until my accounts bled dry, complied until my hands blistered from repainting and uprooting. But here she was, twisting the knife, her board's rubber stamp approvals hidden in fine print. I felt the helplessness peak, a tidal wave crashing over me, years of saving, sweating, rebuilding after my divorce, all auctioned off to strangers for her ego. I lunged toward her, not to strike, but to demand answers, my fists clenched at my sides. "You did this because of a garden? A mailbox? This is my home." The words tore from my throat, echoing the frustration that had built for months. Neighbors I'd once waved to now averted their eyes, complicit in their silence. Tom, the one who'd warned me, lingered at the edge, shaking his head. But Karen didn't back down. She pulled out her phone, dialing with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving mine. 911? Yes, there's a trespasser on abandoned property. He's aggressive. Send help immediately. The call connected, her voice calm, almost bored, as if reporting a stray dog. Trespasser? On my own land? The absurdity fueled my anger, but dread coiled in my gut. Police sirens in the distance? This could end with me in cuffs, my ranch lost forever. The auction paused, the crowd buzzing with tension. Bidders whispered, some packing up, others filming the spectacle. I spotted my grill, the one I'd used for solitary barbecues after long days, tagged with a $50 bid. My garage tools scattered like debris, even my porch swing, creaking empty in the breeze, up for grabs. Each item was a memory stripped bare. The wrench set from Dad teaching me resilience, the garden tools, symbols of my fresh start. Karen's grudge had weaponized the HOA, turning community guidelines into a personal vendetta. Why me? Maybe my independence irked her control-freak nature, or perhaps it was envy. My ranch, larger than her cookie-cutter colonial, a thorn in her perfect suburbia. Whatever the root, it had festered into this nightmare. I refused to let her win unchallenged. Spotting the auction paperwork on the table, I snatched it, scanning frantically. There, buried in legalese, a clause requiring proof of abandonment.
No occupancy for 30 days, verified by board inspection. But I'd been gone only 13 days, and my lights were on timers, mail collected by a friend. "This is fraud," I shouted, waving the papers. "I wasn't abandoned. You lied." Karen's facade cracked for a flicker, her eyes narrowing. She stepped closer, hissing low enough for only me to hear, but I caught the venom. Control slipping. The crowd stirred, murmurs growing. One bidder, an older woman, lowered her paddle. "Is this legit?" she asked aloud. Doubt spread like wildfire. But Karen recovered, her phone still pressed to her ear, updating the dispatcher with exaggerated urgency. "He's destroying documents now! Hurry!" My pulse raced as distant sirens wailed, growing louder. Time was slipping away. I thought of everything I'd lost already: sleep, savings, peace. This was the peak, the moment where her abuse of power crested, threatening to drown me. Frustration boiled into desperation. I felt exposed, raw, every nerve screaming. Yet in that chaos, a spark ignited. I pulled out my own phone, hitting record, capturing her smirk, the auction setup, the crowd. "Everyone, see this? HOA tyranny at its finest. She's stealing my home." Views might not save me now, but exposure could. Neighbors shifted, some nodding, others filming too. The power dynamic teetered. The sirens closed in, red and blue lights flashing over the horizon. Karen's gavel lay abandoned on the podium, her triumph tainted. I stood my ground, chest heaving, as deputies' cars screeched to a halt. Officers emerged, hands on holsters, assessing the scene. "What's going on here?" one demanded. Karen pointed at me, labeling me the intruder. But as I held up the paperwork, voice steady despite the tremor, I knew this was the turning point. Her web of rules had ensnared me, but cracks were showing. Would the law side with her petty empire or expose the injustice? The answer hung in the air, thick with anticipation, as the first officer approached.
The deputy's boots hit the ground with authoritative thuds, their flashlights cutting through the gathering dusk like accusatory beams. The crowd parted instinctively, the auction's chaotic energies shifting to a tense hush. I stood there, paperwork clutched in one hand, phone still recording in the other, my breath ragged from the confrontation. Karen straightened her posture, her clipboard a flimsy barrier against the unfolding scrutiny. She repeated her story to the officers: abandoned property, chronic violations, necessary HOA action. Her words flowed smoothly, rehearsed, but I caught the subtle waver in her voice, the first crack in her armored confidence. The lead deputy, a burly man with a no-nonsense mustache, scanned the scene, the tables laden with my possessions, the bidders frozen mid-gesture, the gavel silent on the podium. He turned to me, eyebrows raised, waiting for my side. I laid it out, voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through my veins. The fines I'd paid, the compliances I'd made, the short trip that she'd twisted into abandonment. I thrust the auction documents forward, pointing to the fraudulent clause invocation. "Check the dates," I urged. "I was gone less than 2 weeks. My home isn't abandoned, it's right here, and so am I." The deputy took the papers, his partner radioing for backup, or perhaps a records check. Karen interjected, her tone sharpening, insisting on my aggressive behavior and the need for immediate removal. But the officers weren't buying her performance wholesale. They separated us, questioning witnesses one by one. The older woman bidder who doubted earlier spoke up, describing the rushed setup. Tom, my neighbor, finally found his voice, recounting Karen's history of overreach. As minutes stretched into an agonizing wait, more neighbors arrived, drawn by the sirens and commotion. Whispers turned to murmurs, then to outright discussions. Phones lit up with recordings, the scene going viral in real time on the neighborhood app. I felt a shift in the air. The collective realization that Karen's reign had gone too far. The deputies delved deeper, pulling up HOA records on their tablets, cross-referencing with county property logs. It didn't take long for the discrepancies to surface. Karen's abandonment claim lacked verification. No official inspection had occurred, just her word and forged timestamps.
The fines? Many based on unwritten rules, her personal inventions rather than board-approved bylaws. The auction house representative, sweating under the scrutiny, admitted receiving rushed paperwork from Karen alone, no full board signature. The turning point came when a second patrol car arrived, this one carrying a county official roused from evening duties. He dealt with HOA complaints before, his expression hardening as he reviewed the evidence. This isn't enforcement. This is harassment. Karen's face paled, her clipboard slipping slightly. She tried to rally, citing clauses and precedents, but her arguments crumbled like dry soil. The deputies cuffed her, not for dramatics, but for the fraud charges brewing, falsifying documents, unauthorized property seizure. As they led her away, her heels dragging in the dirt she'd claimed as her domain, a wave of vindication washed over me. The auction was halted, items returned to my porch in haphazard piles. My ranch stood intact, the evening breeze rustling the fence posts like a sigh of relief. But the resolution wasn't just that night's chaos unwinding. In the days that followed, the fallout rippled through Willow Creek like a storm long overdue. The video I'd recorded exploded online, shared across social media and local news forums. Viewers dissected Karen's smirk, the absurdity of auctioning a lived-in home, the petty rules that had snowballed into this. Reporters knocked on doors, interviewing neighbors who'd stayed silent too long. Tom organized an emergency HOA meeting, petitions circulating to dissolve the current board. Karen's allies scattered, distancing themselves as emails leaked, proof of her manipulating fines for personal gain, perhaps even pocketing portions under the guise of administrative fees. The county launched a formal investigation, uncovering years of similar abuses. Families fined into debt, properties edged toward foreclosure for minor infractions like holiday lights left up a day too long. Karen faced charges, fraud, embezzlement, even civil suits from affected residents. Her colonial house, once a symbol of her control, went quiet, blinds drawn against the stairs. She resigned from the HOA in disgrace, her little black book seized as evidence. The board crumbled without her. Interim elections bringing in fresh faces. People like me, mechanics and teachers who'd felt the sting of overreach. We rewrote the bylaws, stripping vague clauses, mandating transparency. Fines became rare, tied strictly to safety, not aesthetics. My ranch? It bloomed again. I replanted the garden, sunflowers towering defiantly, tomatoes ripening under the sun. My savings rebuilt slowly, bolstered by a small settlement from the HOA's insurance, reparations for the harassment. The long-term consequences reshaped the community. Willow Creek transformed from a tense suburbia to a place of genuine neighborliness. Block parties replaced patrols, conversations flowed without fear of notes in black books. Families who'd considered moving stayed, investing in their homes without dread. Karen? She sold her house quietly, moving to a distant town, her reputation a shadow trailing her. Whispers followed. Job losses, isolation, the weight of her actions finally pressing down. For me, the impact was profound. Sleep returned, untroubled by letters or fines. My work as a mechanic gained purpose. I started a side gig, helping others navigate HOA woes, sharing tips from my ordeal. The ranch became more than a haven. It was a testament to resilience. Each repaired fence post a reminder of battles won. Yet the deepest change was internal. That night, facing the gavel and sirens, I'd touched the raw edge of injustice, the helplessness of systems twisted by petty tyrants. It fueled a quiet determination to question, to document, to unite. Willow Creek's story spread, inspiring reforms in other HOAs, petitions for state-level oversight. Absurd rules were challenged, power abuses exposed. In the end, it wasn't just about saving a ranch. It was about reclaiming dignity from those who wield it like a weapon. And so as I sit on my porch swing now, watching the stars prick the night sky, I wonder, how many more Karens lurk in quiet communities, clipboard in hand? What if we all stood up sooner, turning whispers into roars? The fight against petty power isn't won in one confrontation. It's a daily choice to protect what's ours. Remember that the next time a letter slips under your door, it might just be the start of your own victory.